Welcome back to PAX Unplugged. Jason Levine from the Dice Tower here, and I'm here with Max Temkin, who is one of the co-designers of both Cards Against Humanity and Secret Hitler. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm a big fan. It's exciting for me to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. I mean, with Cards Against Humanity, you've done interesting things. You've had interesting marketing campaigns and kind of marketed your game different than most board game companies do it. So tell me a little how you came up with this strategy.
Sure. I mean, the weird thing with Cards Against Humanity, it's certainly been the most successful game that I've ever worked on, but it's also like the worst game I've ever worked on. It's like objectively a not very good game. But what I'm really proud of with Cards is I think we execute all of the things that go around it really well. So I think the comedy writing is really sharp. I think it gets better every year when we put out the new edition, and this year's is really, really good. And I love all this like weird marketing stuff where we get to go into the real world and bring a little bit of the craziness of Cards Against Humanity into the real world and do that kind of improv with people where we like throw out a crazy idea and then they make it real.
Yeah, it's been very interesting because obviously, like you said, you took the apples to apples kind of theme, but then you threw on the obscene or the dirty words and everything, and you were able to market right off of that.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting about Cards is, we call it, a party game for horrible people and all of that, and we play that up, but I don't think the game is, it has obscene and shocking humor in it, but it has a wide range of humor. Like, there's like animal jokes and cute jokes and absurdities of the English language. It's just a comedy game, and we let it go where it takes us, so sometimes we get weird or it gets, it gets pretty, blue, I guess, but I'm just proud of it as like a comedy game, and I think for people who aren't professional comedians, the ability to like sit down around the table with your friends and you mash these sentences together and make your friends laugh is a pretty good feeling for people. So I get it's always nice like coming to a show like PAX, and I get to meet people and they tell me a story of like they played with their family and their parents were laughing at these outrageous jokes. Like, that's cool. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it brings the humor like basically like when you go to an R-rated movie, which is kind of cool because, obviously it's not for everyone. If you have kids, this isn't the game for you, but for adults, I think it's fine. Yeah,
there's this idea in theater that game designers talk about called the magic circle. Do you know about this? So the idea is like when you go see a play, you enter into what theater people call the magic circle, which is a place where you accept the reality of what's happening on stage, even though it's not real. You like inhabit the fiction of the play, and games create a similar effect for people. Once you decide to suspend the everyday rules of how to behave and behave according to the rules of the game, it's this kind of magical moment. So I think for Cards Against Humanity, people find themselves making jokes that they would never make in their real life and laughing at things that they would never laugh at. And there's a kind of, I think it's very liberating for people. I think there's a kind of openness with that. But it's obviously that's also the magic behind like role-playing games, right? Like once people get this little set of rules of just roll these dice and read this book, it's like people are capable of amazing acts of storytelling and bravery and heroism that you would be surprised to discover in yourself, I think.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because obviously in everyday life people aren't going to be doing outrageous things, but they get to kind of act it out with the game.
Yeah, and the game gives people a space to do that where you're not going to be judged, right? Well, the card made me say it. You can't get mad at me. It's in the game. And in fact, people do get mad at us, but that's okay. As long as they're laughing too.
Exactly. I mean, another interesting thing you do, which I think goes back to your marketing, I've noticed at conventions you've done some very interesting things, like at Gen Con, after the first day, you put up a sign with an interesting phrase and basically walked out of the convention after you sold out. Also at a convention in Canada, you basically said, pay what you want and let people just buy what they wanted for whatever price, for nothing or for whatever they wanted. Where do you come up with these kind of marketing ideas?
Well, I think, our approach to doing these shows, we have an unbelievable events team. Trin Garitano is like the head of our events team, and she's a genius at executing this stuff. So usually it starts with like, we decide what shows we're going to do early in the year, and we have our map of like, okay, this year we're going to hit Gen Con and PAX and, Fan Expo, or you try and make our list. And then we try to think, what do we know about these shows? We one of our rules that we've picked up over the years is we never exhibit at a show the first time we're going to it. We always go to a show first to see what's going on there. And then when we talk about what we're going to do at this show, we say, what's everyone else doing at this show? And then how do we be completely different from them? Because cards is, I'm very proud of it. I think it's been successful, but there's no way we can compete with the big companies at Gen Con. We're just not on that same level. We're never going to have a bigger booth than, Paizo or Osmodee or whatever. It's just not going to happen. So there's no point in us playing that game of trying to build a bigger booth and have more space on the floor. So we always try to be more creative than them. We always think about can we do something that's going to make people laugh? Can we do something people can take a picture of and put it on Instagram? And another question we ask is when people go home from the show, when people go home from Gen Con and their friends ask, oh, how was Gen Con? What happened? I want them to say, Gen Con was awesome. You're not going to believe this thing Cards Against Humanity did. And if what we're doing doesn't rise to the level of being in that story, it's not worth our time and money to do it. So and I think that's the other piece of it is we say no to a lot more things than we say yes to. So we come up with 20 ideas and we say no to 19 of them. And then that one, we try and make it really good.
No, I mean, I think the marketing's been very strong on it. And obviously in stores as well, you have a very quick sell-through rate. It seems like your game goes into stores and it's out of stores very quickly.
Yeah, we have a weird retail program. One of the things that's, again, I'm proud of with cards that's behind the scenes in the execution is when we started making this game, we were just 8 kids, and we didn't really know anything about the industry. I didn't really know. Nobody knew you were supposed to get a publisher. No one told us that. You're supposed to get a publisher and distributor and get into retail. We didn't know that stuff. We just looked at stores and we were like, "There's games here. I guess everyone sells these games. They do everything themselves." And we're like, "Well, I guess we got to figure out how to do that." So, cards. We write, design, manufacture, market, distribute, print, import, everything ourselves. We do it all ourselves. And for the retail, it's very important to us that we give really good treatment to friendly local game stores because I think those are important recommendation engines for people to find out about the games and play them with their friends. We just built our own distribution network, and people can sign up as a retailer and buy stuff from us at a way better rate than I think they can get from a catalog or a distributor, and we sell it right to them, and there's no middlemen, and I think it's an awesome system, but it's up to I think one of the things that's missing that we're still learning how to do is these distributors help stores figure out the right amount of inventory to order. They help model sales and all of that, and we don't know how to do that. We're still learning that stuff, so I think stores are still trying to figure out what's the right amount to order from us.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be tough to do everything on your own when most companies have, Alliance or ACD or all sorts of people, GTS, there's companies that are distributing and you have to do all this on your own. So how much tougher is it?
It's hard. I mean, we have people are always surprised when I say we have 30 people working at Cards Against Humanity, but a lot of what those people do is things like shipping. We have our shipping company Black Box, and we ship all kinds of games and Kickstarter projects and stuff through that same infrastructure that we're building. But the other thing, just to take a step back, I do worry a little bit about the tabletop. I mean, I'm curious what your thoughts about this are. But I worry a little bit about the tabletop industry because when you talk to store owners, they all talk about the retail is dying and it's very challenging. When you talk to game designers, I think most game designers will at least in private, will admit that it's harder and harder and harder to make a living and the margins get smaller and smaller. So I don't really know, if you try and think forward, what does it look like in 10 or 20 years? Is there going to be a convention like this that's filled with these small independent game designers? I sure hope so, but I think that the business model is going to have to continue to change and grow and adapt. So one thing I think about is a lot like music and indie music. The recording labels for music are largely dying and going away, and the relationship now is artists are making music and selling it directly to their fans, and fans support artists in a patronage model. And there was a lot of fear when that started happening. People started saying, well, the music labels are going away, there's going to be no more music. But clearly that hasn't happened. This is maybe the golden era of music. There's more good music available for people to listen to than ever before. So that version of events gets me really excited about tabletop. So I think that what you're going to see is things are going to get really challenging for those big mega companies, the distributors, the publishers, those huge conglomerate companies. And I think, on the flip side of this, you see all this consolidation in tabletop, right? That's going to be a tough market for them. But what I hope happens, the positive outcome of that is that I hope it opens up this golden era of everyone being able to make their own independent games and make art games and go right to their fans and sell stuff right to people. So that's the infrastructure that we're trying to make right now.
Yeah, I mean, Kickstarter's kind of doing that a lot. I mean, you've seen some very, you guys did Kickstarter for Secret Hitler, and you've seen Kickstarters for things like Seventh Continent, Gloomhaven. There's a lot of people now who say, I can make a successful game and run it through a Kickstarter and not have to go through the traditional channels.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things that account for this sort of like indie explosion that's happening right now. One of them is Kickstarter, and it's the idea of crowdfunding, and that fans can just support the kind of games they want. And it cuts out a publisher who can say, well, people, listen, if we went to a publisher with Cards Against Humanity back in 2010, they would have been like, no one wants this game. Like, it's never going to work. In fact, I think I said that when the other guys were working on it. I was like, this is never going to work. We shouldn't do this. But so that's half of it, but the other half is like the tools of creation are getting democratized really quickly. The kind of journalism and reporting that you guys are doing of taking people behind the industry and giving people access to this stuff. There's a lot of kids who watch this and they're like, I should make a game. This is something I could do. As well as like there's all of these like printers, manufacturers, like prototyping tools. It's all getting cheaper and easier to use. And then in our office, like the other side of it is like we have like CNC machines, laser cutters, 3D printers, CNC Dremel machines. That's how we prototype all of our print products, our packaging. We do everything in-house. Like that feels really exciting. Like we don't need to go to some huge company to make a box for us. Like we have these like really affordable tools, and we can do it right in our office.
No, it's very interesting. So we're not going to get too political here, but you just recently decided to run a campaign to buy land on the Mexican border. How much of that is publicity versus what are you actually doing? Because I found that very interesting that you're like, we're going to go buy land to stop the wall. And obviously a lot of people got on board with this.
Well, I think the right way to read anything that Cards Against Humanity does is it's comedy first. We're a comedy company, not a politics company. So we came up with this idea because we thought it was funny, it was shocking, it would get people's attention. I think in comedy, this is my personal feeling, I think there's always a kernel of truth in comedy. I think if people are laughing at something, the more that it gets you in your gut, the more there's something true or uncomfortable or honest there. And the wall, I don't think this is a political statement. The wall is a preposterous idea. It's never going to work. First of all, it's never going to get built. But even if it does get built, it's going to be the $70 billion boondoggle, and it's never going to work. People are just going to climb over it with a ladder. It's one of the dumbest ideas in American politics. I just think that the comedy of Cards Against Humanity politically engaging with the wall is that the right comedy angle for us to just insert ourselves into this extremely stupid debate and make it even stupider. That's kind of the dumb angle that we found that works with Trump, is to kind of like meet him face to face, like, okay, Trump, you've met your intellectual rival, Cards Against Humanity. Like, that's very funny to me. I don't know why. It's just because Cards is so dumb. It's like we fit right in there, I guess. But yeah, if enough people did this, is there a chance that it would slow down the eminent domain process and make it harder for them to build the wall? Absolutely. It's a direct action that I think may well have some small effect. But is Cards Against Humanity's one little holiday stunt going to stop the wall? Absolutely not. And it's not intended to be that. For me, I'm glad that people are talking about the issue and that we got a little news cycle in about the wall. And also just that we got some commentary of like everyone can just, sometimes a joke is the way that everyone is allowed to step back and be like, God, this is the dumbest idea. It's so dumb. It's never going to work. So I hope that that's what we were able to get people to think about.
Yeah, it's just very interesting because, like I said, you do some crazy shock marketing and it obviously promotes your product very well. Secret Hitler. Now, I've talked about this game a lot, and I've said that I did a review of it a few months ago, and I said that this is one of my favorite party games. I really feel like it's the coup killer, and this is like the best social deduction party game that I've played. And how did you guys come up with the idea on this?
Sure. So, Secret Hitler is it came out. So it's designed by Mike and Tommy, who share a co-working space with me in Chicago, and it came out of me and Mike and Tommy and a bunch of us were playing Avalon like every night after work, and we went insane with Avalon, and we were developing strategies and counter strategies, and we had this office metagame that was evolving every night. And then we played Avalon just to death, and we like exhausted it, and we were like, okay, we're out of things to do in this game. And I think Mike and Tommy started experimenting with like literally hacking Avalon. Like, can we put cards into this? Can we change it? Can we make it more interesting? And eventually it took on this, they had this idea of like that you're like working together to pass laws. And I think I was helpful in figuring out the fascism and the World War II theme. And Matt came on shortly after that and helped us figure out the the brand and the identity and the look and the feel of it. And yeah, I mean, I think through all that stuff, like I'm trying to think of any other interesting things about how that game came about. I mean, we worked on that game while we were watching Trump get into the Republican primary, and at the time it was clear to us looking at the guy. It was like, this guy's an authoritarian, and he's like this wannabe dictator, right? And it's amazing that these guys can still exist in a democracy, and that was very much informing our thinking about Secret Hitler. And like, we just wanted it to be this. It wasn't like the point of the game is, for me at least, is not to say Trump is Hitler. The point of the game is to say, look how easy it is for someone who doesn't want to engage in good faith in democracy and like be honest and tell the truth and like engage, like just engage in a healthy way in democracy. Look how easy it is for them to throw the system off and to disrupt things. Which anyone who's played Secret Hitler knows, it's very easy to disrupt and throw things off.
So tell me more about the design end. Where did you come up? I think the novel idea on this is getting the 3 laws and then throwing one out, taking 2, throwing the second one out. Where did you kind of come up with this idea for the game?
So that was Mike and Tommy also. I'm not sure where they came up with it exactly. It was... When I came on, I came down for a weekend when most of the game had been prototyped out, and it was still pieces of cardboard, and I think it was pieces from like Slap 45 kind of like mixed in. But like almost all of the mechanics had been pinned down by the time I was there. So I came in, and in a weekend we kind of decided like, how do we define that the fascists are clearly evil, and we made them lizards, and like what kind of aesthetic do we want to go with this thing? Like, do we want it to resemble kind of like a bunch of government kind of like bureaucratic papers and stuff? But I wasn't specifically involved in the like pick 3, pass 2, pick 1 design process. So I'm not sure exactly where they came from there.
I can talk a little bit about that. Although the original mechanic was Mike and Tommy's. So I think there's 2 pieces that fed into the creation of that mechanic. The first thing is, with any social deduction game, on the one hand, you don't want everyone to have perfect information. If everyone knows everything, you can solve the game like a puzzle, right? So Werewolf is a great example on the other side of that, of nobody knows what's going on at all in Werewolf. And Werewolf is more like theater. Like, everyone's acting, but you're making decisions, and you have no idea why you're deciding the things you're doing. So to me, you get into like, in game design, there's this idea of like meaningful choice. Werewolf, you get into like meaningful, or I feel this way about One Night Ultimate Werewolf, which I understand is a crowd favorite, but for me, I play that game and I'm like, I'm not making informed decisions here. Like, I'm not making meaningful choices. I don't have a strategy here. So I sometimes feel myself getting frustrated playing those kind of games. On the other hand, you don't. Like I said, if you have people have perfect information, then there's no suspense because you can figure everything out. So I think with Secret Hitler, and this is what we got obsessed with Avalon. And in Avalon, there's a lot of information on the table, and it feels like you could almost figure out who everyone is at the table and what's going on, but you just can't. There's just not enough information that you could just not figure it out. So with Secret Hitler, we wanted to push that even closer. And with Secret Hitler, what really good players can do is they can model it out. So they can say, so when the 3 policy thing happens, there's just 1 or 2 little pieces of information that you don't know, right? What were the discarded tiles? Is everyone telling the truth or lying? And what you can say is, okay, only 3 things could have happened here. If thing A happened, this is the table state. If thing B happened, this is the table state. And if thing C happened, that's the table state. For people who are really good at projecting that stuff out, the game is really tantalizing because you can almost it's like a puzzle, but it's missing just 1 piece. And you can almost put it together conditionally as you play. And it really does inform telling when other people are lying, or alternately telling for when it's okay for you to tell a lie. I think that is brilliant and fascinating. The other piece, then the obvious thing with the policies is like, you want a thing where it requires cooperation and someone can defect, but their defection is more or less secret. And so boiling it down into just 3 little things that you're passing around was totally brilliant on their part. It felt like they kept taking away and taking away and taking away until they were just left with like the bare essence of this great mechanic.
Yeah, I felt that mechanic kind of makes the game because it puts that doubt and it puts it in a good way. Obviously, later on, as the red chart gets further, you have things where you could look at people or take people out of the game. But in the early going, the three things and did they lie, did they not lie, really makes the game intriguing, and especially having more reds than blues in there, especially.
Yeah, and go for it.
I was just saying, even though it's more complicated than something like Werewolf, I think the system that Mike and Tommy set up is like way more accessible in a way. Like people come in and they have to learn the game a little bit, but once they do, it's very easy to play your role. You don't have to think like, oh, what would so-and-so do? Like, I'm acting in this. You have like very kind of like pivotal like decisions to make, and it's really interesting. People like get immediately into it and kind of like understand, at least in my experience.
The other mechanic in the game that I think is totally underrated and totally brilliant is, so you have this deck of policy cards, and if any team pulls ahead, the game rubber bands so hard, right? If all the fascist policies come out and you get a huge lead, the liberals can make like a big rally and come back because the deck composition changes in their favor. The players never feel like that's the case. Like, it feels like what happens is you play really hard and then you start winning, and it's amazing how much people. It gives people this feeling of like that the game balances itself out, but it's really just rubber banding with the cards. But it's totally brilliant. It's like the most elegant little thing about the deck composition, but it totally works.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, it's right now my favorite social deduction game, and you did keep it classy. Tell me about the artwork. Obviously, you didn't do real themes of 1930 socialist Germany. Instead, you did like alligators and very different to make the game more cartoony rather than more lifelike.
Well, so I think starting with the name, it's very pointed, right? Like there's a very real world reference for this thing. And so from the art perspective, what we wanted to do was keep the game kind of applicable, right? Like you were talking about Trump, it's like very much the liberals are kind of a group of people you might see in everyday life. So taking kind of something that's happened in the past, but keeping it open and kind of like interpretable, and letting people kind of like see themselves in it was really important. And also like not really like hitting the nail on the head too many times with the Hitler thing. Like it's very like out front, and we wanted the like kind of like the core of the game to be like very applicable and accessible and open to people, in kind of like contemporary society, for instance.
No, I mean, I like it. I like especially how you don't just have a role, but you have a role and then a secondary role. So you have two different things in your envelope, which kind of adds to the intrigue as well.
Yeah, that was, that mechanic I actually don't really like personally, and we just couldn't find a way to design around it. But that's because when you get an investigation, you want to find out if the player's a fascist, but you don't want to find out if they're Hitler. And we couldn't think of a better way to do that than to have that second card in there. So it feels like a little bit of a Band-Aid to me. Like, I wish we had a more elegant way of doing it. We had all these different designs that didn't exactly work out, and that wound up being, unfortunately, the most elegant one. But it does always bug me a little bit whenever I see someone getting confused about which one to pass in. Yeah.
When I came on, I think it was the prototype that you had helped build. It was like the top half of the card was fascist, and then the bottom half would say if you were Hitler or not, so you like pull it slightly out of the envelope. And I thought that was really elegant in some ways, but it was like in execution, people would like, the first game I played, I ended up being Hitler, which is like an awkward situation anyway, but I didn't realize that I had to pull the card like all of the way out. And it seems like, I agree, like there wasn't ever quite a perfect solution. I think the two cards is the simplest like version of the idea, but I wish there was something we'd found that was like a little like tighter or cleaner.
It's very interesting to hear the concept behind the game and how you went from Avalon into this and what you put into it. Are you guys working on anything else, like anything new for the future?
Well, I personally, I'm working on a one-shot tabletop RPG system with a bunch of modules with this designer Will Heimert, who I think is like one of my favorite tabletop designers and writers and game thinkers in the world. And maybe we hope to have that out sometime over the next year. But I also work in politics, so a lot of my time, unfortunately, lately has just been like trying to work on politics, and it's hard to get my head in the game with making games.
Right now I'm working with a bunch of people down in LA making a mobile game. It's called Guildlings. And then I also have a couple like very early kind of stage projects that I haven't really like developed into anything else right now.
Well, thank you both for coming on, and it was a pleasure to have you today.
Yeah, thank you. This was really fun.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So once again, Max Temkin and Mackenzie Schubert from Cards Against Humanity and Secret Hitler, and this has been Jason Levine with another Dice Tower interview here at PAX Unplugged.